We are now at 6 o'clock, so we will call this meeting of the West Southwest Milwaukee School District to order, please. If you could please rise for the pledge, and Mr. Sikich, would you be so kind as to lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States
of America,
Republic,
to the republic
and
which it stands,
under
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, if we could do roll call then, please, Suzette?
Yes. Mr. Ustruck.
Here.
Mr. Keller.
Here.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser.
Here.
Ms. Klug.
Ms. Klug has no audio, but she is present.
Thank you. Mrs. Justin.
Okay.
I see Mrs. Justin is here.
Okay, can I,
And President Emmons.
Here. Okay. Notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any additions or modifications to tonight's agenda, Dr. Lexman?
I do. I would actually like to pull item 11.2. This is related to the facilities policy revision. I need to explain this a little bit here just so the board understands. It'll come back around, but we want to do it the right way. And so Christine brought this to our attention over the weekend, and it's an interesting interpretation of two different policies that we have. And so the way we've been pursuing policy development and revision is it comes to the full board, first reading, gets held for 30 days, and then it comes back again for board approval, which is what we've been pursuing here. And it's the way the work was explained to me when I started with our school district. And that's because the board operates as a committee of the whole under policy 185. But in policy 151, which is our policy on policy development, the language is that policy, new policy revision should be held in committee for 30 days. And so the way it was explained to me when I started was that it's held in committee when the board is committee of the whole. And I thought, this gets interesting to me. So over the weekend, I sent it over to Dan Vliet to get his feedback. And what he shared was interesting to me. He said, well, I actually prefer the way your board does this by bringing first reading to the entire board. It just gives more opportunity for input and the whole board sees it right away. And then he said, but what you're doing is actually not consistent with your current policy. So he prefers we do it this way, but he said right now you really shouldn't be doing it this way. And so what it means is that we'll take a step here to bring this particular revision of the facility policy to the appropriate committee. It'll be more feedback opportunity. It'll be held there for 30 days. We'll bring it back to the full board. And then what we'll do in the Neola policy updates, we'll make sure we take a look at that policy development policy so that it allows for the practice that we've been engaged in, which the one, Dan described as he prefers, that, more input is better. So that's a long explanation to ask that item be held, but I appreciate the opportunity to explain that.
Okay, thank you. So we will be moving item 11.2 off of today's agenda. All right, we move on to item 6, which is a public hearing on our waivers. Teacher, do you want to begin the public hearing?
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. So the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction is yet again, similar to last year, provided the opportunity for districts to apply for a waiver for particular elements that are normally required for schools under statute. And I am actually going to share my screen for a second so that everybody can see what that waiver application like. I also put it for the board's viewing in my board update so that you guys could have a chance to take a look at it. But the full extent of the waiver. So, sorry, scroll up to the top. And it basically, asks for the general identifying information, and then it asks for an abstract that explains our plan around COVID-19 when it comes to school and to come to education. It provides some general assurances that we read through all of these. One of the assurances being that we hold a public hearing and provide the opportunity for input into the waiver before we submit that statement of need. And then these are all of the items for which a school district can request a waiver. Some of them don't apply to us because we don't offer driver's ed through our school district. That one wouldn't apply for us. Other ones do apply to us that we would not be considering to apply for a waiver under. Things like academic and career planning. We are continuing to do academic and career planning with students, even though we're all virtual right now, just as we normally would. So we don't want to do a waiver for that one. Things like human growth and development. We'll continue to follow our plan around human growth and development, even though that is an option for something that we could request a waiver around. After review with our leadership team and our leadership and learning team and board committee, the ones that are looking to apply for the waiver on are hours of instruction. So I just cut and pasted the ones we're doing onto the sheet so it was easier to see, and I'll make that bigger so everyone can see it. Hours of instruction, which requires school districts to annually schedule at least 437 hours of pupil instruction in kindergarten, 1,050 hours of direct pupil instruction in grades 1 through 6, and 1,137 hours of direct pupil instruction in grades 7 through 12. Given the fact that we are doing the Wednesdays where we do check and connect and we're not scheduling direct instruction with students on those Wednesdays for grades 6 through 12, we would need to apply for the waiver for this one in order to ensure that we're still following the guidance that is given to us. The next one that we would be looking at is length of school day. And this one requires school boards to establish rules for scheduling hours in a normal school day. So while we are still offering a full day of school, we have allowed some flexibility at the school sites to be adjusting the day as it normally would be scheduled to best meet the needs of the families that they're serving and the students that they're serving. So it's not necessarily consistent across all of the schools, the way that we're scheduling those days. And plus this allows us some flexibility as we go into, as this has gone on a little longer than we had originally hoped, and is likely, given the metrics, possibly going on for longer. Given that, we want some flexibility to be able to adjust for some additional prep time as we can and as we need to, especially for our elementary teachers who don't have that check and connect Wednesday. And so we want to make sure we have that flexibility within the guidance from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. The next one is regular instruction. And so that, and you can read the whole thing, but one of the things during as normal is instruction in language arts, social studies, math, science, health, physical education, art, and music. And while we are doing most of this, one example in particular would be the physical education for students. So the Wisconsin, let me grab this one. The on physical education would say that Standard J is a comprehensive curriculum and program of instruction for all students for physical education. Kindergarten through sixth grade meets 3 times per week minimum. In a middle school format, which is what we have in West Allis, West Milwaukee, you meet weekly minimum. And then K through 6 can be with the actual licensed physical education teacher or under that physical education teacher's guidance. So how we normally do that in our school district is for elementary school, the students see the gym teacher twice per week, and then once per week, the gym teacher writes a lesson plan. The physical education teacher, Mr. Sikich, sorry about that, writes a lesson plan that's implemented for team sports and games at either recess or when the teacher has breaks during their normal instructional day. Well, obviously we would advise against that in the midst of this, that we're not advising kids to play team sports and team games when they're out and about or together in classrooms. And so this one will allow us some flexibility just to make sure that we're not missing a piece like this as we go into this unusual school year. And then the last one that we would be looking to do the waiver for would be the school attendance enforcement. And while we want our students coming to school regularly, we want them participating synchronously at any and all given opportunities. This requires us to follow our attendance plan. And this is a time where we need to be giving some grace to our students and to their families. And we have not necessarily been automatically following, writing the truancy letters, issuing citations for truancy and things like that. We're really instead working very closely with families who are struggling to attend school regularly to provide additional resources. And we do a lot of that during normal times as well, but we've really extended those resources during this time because we know there are a lot of factors going on as we navigate COVID-19 that just aren't typical for anyone. And so we want to be sure that we're able to provide some flexibility to what would normally be our attendance plan outlined. And those are the only four that of the options that are available for waiver that we would be requesting, or given the guidance that we would be requesting. So we can take some questions tonight, and then the plan would be to, as long as we stuck with those four at the tail end of tonight's discussion, that then at the next board meeting, we would bring forward the actual application completed for approval by the whole school board.
Thanks, Deidre. The way we have it agendaed is we would take public comments on the hearing itself and then open up the board comments and administrative. So if there's any public comments on the public hearing content and the request for the waiver, now would be the time to raise your hand and we will get you called on. And seeing no public comments, we would then move on to questions from the board on the public hearing and the request for the waivers. Okay. Teacher, can you go over the timeline then? So if this comes back for, the application comes for approval to the board, what would happen next? What kinds of updates, timelines, things like that would occur?
So then we would send the application to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. They haven't really set a deadline for that on their website, and they haven't given too much indication on when you'd see those back. So then I'm imagining that last year, the way it was done last year during emergency remote teaching last school year was that everyone who submitted an application was automatically approved. The Department of Public Instruction is reviewing them more carefully this year, and they're encouraging districts to really try to do every one of those elements as best they can. So I'll explain our plan very clearly in that abstract, and then I'll just notify the board as soon as we get notification from them about assuming that it was approved or whether there were parts of it that they wanted us to review and revise and return to them again.
Great. Any board members have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. We will watch for that to come back. All right, we will conclude that public hearing and then move on to item 7, which is general public comment. So if anyone has any public comments for the board meeting as a whole, now is the time for that. Let me scroll through here. Any public comments? There's none in the room. All right, we will then move on to item 8, our superintendent's report. Dr. Lexman?
Great. Good evening, everybody, and thank you. I'm going to start with 8.1, which is our returning to school update. Sorry, now I lost you guys. Share screen. Movie over. There we go. Oh, no, present. There, now I'm back on track. So this has been, every regular board meeting, we do an update on our return to school plan. And these have been relatively brief the last couple meetings because not much has changed in the directions that we would like. But again, a couple of things that we'll hit on this evening, where we are with our health metrics, and then again, the internal metrics. We're going to really focus now on virtual learning through first semester. The trends don't indicate that, given the metrics we've set, we're going to be getting back to school anytime soon. And with the likely negative impact of travel during the holidays, I think it is fair to just project out to the end of first semester, and then we'll again talk about some next steps. So where we are at the end of last week, things again have moved in the wrong direction, except for a tiny little shift in metric 3, which is Milwaukee County positivity rate. It actually went down a little tick. Now, Sometimes these things get adjusted in the following week, so I don't want to celebrate that too much, but at least it's stable across those 2 weeks. But again, we are weighting more heavily now the local metrics, metric 2 and 4, the West Allis, West Milwaukee metrics, and hoping that we start to see some changes soon, but we are not ready to make any phase change given how we've structured our plan at this point. Internal metrics are remaining pretty consistent. So in the dashboard itself, we have this tracked every single week, but we're still at the end of last week. Sorry, I didn't change the date here. My apologies. That's cut and paste from the previous report. So we had 9 active cases among staff, 48 that were close contact, so in quarantine. Only 3 were work related, so we think that's encouraging. But the fact that we have 48 that would be quarantining if we were running school, that's enough to start shutting grade levels or even an entire school if it's a cluster. And so that's partly why I'll get to the plan of moving forward with all virtual through the end of the semester because of this on again, off again thing that starts to happen to schools. And among students, we had 18 positive cases, 69 that are quarantined, 0 school related, which was really positive for us, and 0 that are low risk being monitored. And 69 is a little bit high for our trend, but the fact that 0 are school related, we think is positive. So in terms of staying virtual through first semester, again, the metrics have just not improved. And Wisconsin continues to see widespread transmission. We all are well aware that we're one of the big national hotspots. And by communicating that we're going to stay virtual through first semester, parents can now just plan with some certainty. That's not every week are we going back in 2 weeks, do we got to change everything around in our family and our plan right now. And Deidre and I, through some of our kind of town hall meetings and discussions with leadership and discussions with teacher leader groups, some staff shared with us their frustration about being in some of our neighboring districts and the on again, off again approach. And in fact, one of our employees shared that their family received a message on Friday that on Monday they were going to go back to in-person learning, and on Sunday it was reversed. And so they scrambled to make their plan for their young kids, and then on Sunday scrambled again. And we thought, well, given kind of where we are with the metrics, just to settle that dust down for everybody. And I'm hoping that by the time we get through the holidays and into January, we get a better sense of the vaccine rollout, because that front is more and more promising. So now it really depends on who gets it and how fast. On that front, we'll be participating in what will likely be a statewide effort to lobby to have educators early in the cycle of vaccination, because then at least we know our educators are safer as we start to bring people back to school. And if we do, when we do, at this point, just like I talked about recently, we'll focus on possibly bringing back much smaller groups than our plan called for initially, just so we get started with some kids that we think are, especially 4K, 5K, really critical to get them back in buildings in front of us, but not in large groups of hundreds and hundreds of kids in elementary schools all at once. So we have a different way to kind of ease into this at this point. And so this communication about remaining virtual will happen right after the break, kind of going into the holiday. We thought people are paying attention to many other things right now rather than kind of our plan. So we'll let this particular holiday go, and then we'll start communicating that out to parents and all staff kind of more formally. Then kind of next steps, what's coming up on the horizon. So next week, Monday, we have a meeting with the West Allis Health Department to review our winter sports plan. That has been at their request. I do not know kind of what prompted that. They haven't really shared that at this point. They've just asked for myself, the athletic director, school nurse representative, Beth will be a part of it to talk about this again. And they may make a recommendation that we would suspend winter athletics at this point. That would not surprise me, and I don't want to start ringing alarm bells about that at all, but I do want to be honest about kind of what I'm anticipating at this point, at least, or it may be some revisions to the plan, but right now we're implementing a plan with universal masking, no spectators. I don't know that there's a lot more we can do to head off any kind of risk of transmission. But again, it's just being really clear and transparent about how we move through this. Then we will be developing that plan about bringing 4K, 5K, maybe 6th and 8th graders back, so it's smaller groups. In the work around our camps, that's something we're committed to and want to keep going. So our recreation day camps seem to be really important for some families. These are not huge enrollments, but the enrollments have been growing. And we think the longer this goes on, there will be more interest in having kids in camps. But we're going to hit a point where we can't staff it or can't maintain staffing given kind of what happens. And that's why I noted the number of staff, 48 in quarantine. Well, that's a cluster inside of a camp. Suddenly 100 kids don't have a place to go. And so we're kind of rethinking the way we've organized these camps. And so right now, or right after the Thanksgiving break, next week, Monday, all available educational assistants are going to be assigned until further notice to the recreation camps. So we have lots of EAs there already. Some EAs are actually working in buildings right now. And we shared earlier that we have a handful of students with special needs back in buildings for whom we just cannot provide access to a free, appropriate public education without them being in school with us. And so educational assistants are doing their normal, in quotes, normal job. So those wouldn't be available educational assistants, but all the other ones are going to be assigned to recreation camps. We're providing N95 masks for anybody that wants them. And we currently have about 1,000 N95 masks in inventory. And that was anticipating that we have teachers and other employees want them when we hit phase 2. We thought that would have happened by now. So we're redeploying a good number of those to rec camps, and we'll purchase more of the N95 masks to replenish that so that when we do come back, anybody that wants one, needs one, will have access. We're also distributing some of the protective equipment, namely the plexiglass shields. So for aides that are working in really close proximity to little ones, if they really feel more confident having the plexi, it's available. And then Deidre and her team have been working on revising the student schedule at camp. And what we did is what we started with camps, we didn't think it would be going on into November, December, and January. And so the camp staff have been adjusting to all of the various school schedules. So every elementary school runs a little bit on its own schedule, and that's local decision-making that we support. But it makes for complexity when we have a situation like this, where now we have little ones from 11 different school buildings, potentially all in one camp, all trying to do different things at different times. And it's been really hard for camp staff. So Deidre's working on a more streamlined, more consistent student schedule that the schools then will have to do some adaptation towards to make this more manageable for the EAs and the recreation staff in our camps. And then essentially what will be happening by assigning all of the available EAs to the rec camps is it'll be overstaffed, which we think is a good thing, because that'll allow for a flexibility and adjusting to staff quarantine requirements. So that, again, if we can keep camps running, even through individuals having to be quarantined, it's, I think, the best we can do to support parents and families at this point. So that concludes that part of the superintendent's report. Are there do you see any questions, Stephanie, at this point for me? I see Jeff.
Just opening up a few here. Jeff, go ahead.
Marty, if they talk about wanting to shut down winter sports, would it be all of them, or would it be like in this fall where the ones we thought were safe could go on? And
that's a good question. I have not heard anything about potentially moving some of the winter sports into spring. I think spring is going to be complicated enough, so I doubt that would happen. I'm hoping that maybe it is that kind of thing where they decide some sports should not go forward. But again, it's going to be a recommendation, right? So our health departments have stayed in that mode, and it really becomes our decision making that is final. But we have followed their lead consistently, and I think it's important that we would continue to do that.
Thank you.
No?
Sorry. So regarding vaccinations, and this is very early in the game, I know, but is there any thought? Obviously, usually we follow the state's lead regarding required vaccinations for things like participating in school, not only for students, but also for staff. If a vaccine were to come out, this would be kind of a unique situation where I doubt the state would be so nimble as to require something like this so early in its adoption. But will we have any role in what we would be asking our staff and possibly our students to participate in this vaccination if and when it becomes available?
Yeah, good question. It actually came up in one of our town hall meetings, and since then, at that moment, I was like, good question. I don't know the answer to that just yet. But the guidance that we've received so far, and it really came through the school nurse consultant. So that's the kind of the specialist for the state for Department of Public Instruction. They said all of the rules, at least the way they understand it right now, all of the rules that apply to school vaccinations and exemptions and those kind of things would apply for a COVID vaccine. So that's how they're kind of interpreting it at this point. So we wouldn't be able to require it unless something pretty significant changes at the state level, is the way I interpret that. But we can certainly do an information campaign, which we will do, to really encourage that families, employees, kids get vaccinated. So I think that is a step that we can do that hopefully helps promote that. And that seems to be kind of a national effort right now as well, is to start building confidence in the coming vaccines. And now there's, it looks like 3 on the horizon. So we'll be a part of that.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question. You talked about the safe camps, the camps that are out there right now. Has a cap been decided on for those camps? I know originally we talked about 75, but I was just wondering if there was an official number that was decided on, because obviously as we allow more and more in, it kind of defeats it. You're starting to defeat the purpose of limiting it, and you're getting to a size of if we just had people in school, if you get to a certain level. So has there been an official number that's been decided on for those camps?
Not yet. That was one of the things Shelley and her team were taking back from the conversations last week, is to set that kind of final permanent number. So Deidre, I don't know if you talk more about that because you've been engaged with Shelley on other things.
Yeah, the one thing she's trying to keep is those group sizes down. So it depends on number of staff, and group size is kind of where she's leaning at the present moment. So part of our strategy in making sure that we have additional staff assigned is that we can keep those group sizes down within the recommendations from the health department. So that's kind of how she's gauging it right now, is based on that. It's really because they have the flexibility to spread out, so they've been working with each building to say, okay, of this many students, we need to be able to spread out this much farther. But it's primarily whether or not they can staff it to keep the group size at that 10 kind of range. And so that's really what she's been gauging it on up until this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go on to 8.2, so the legislative update. So IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, there was a class action brought against all U.S. school districts, and that has been dismissed. On July 28th, a complaint was brought in the Southern District of New York against every school district in the U.S., alleging that all are or have violated the IDEA when deciding to close schools in March due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So the plaintiffs not only argued that the students were denied FAPE, so I mentioned that earlier about some of the things we've done to meet the requirements of IDEA and the needs of kids, more importantly, but that there were numerous procedural violations as well. So on November 13th, the district court for the Southern District dismissed the case against all defendants, including all Wisconsin districts. Though the case was dismissed against all defendants, the decision indicated that individuals in their respective states would not be prevented from seeking a remedy. So individual families, parents could bring suit against us, but that's not different than during any other time. So any individual student who believes he or she is being denied FAPE by virtue of the closure of schools during the pandemic or the provision of services remotely can bring a claim against his or her school district and state. So in this case, however, plaintiffs attempted to craft a one-size-fit-all omnibus lawsuit, but it was ruled that it is not how IDEA cases can or should be handled. So it's a little bit about why we're really being sensitive to the needs of some of our students identified with special education needs, to make sure that they have access to the education they're entitled to. So then DPI on the budget front for the coming biennial budget, the Department of Public Instruction wants more than $1.4 billion in new general purpose revenue, GPR, in the 21 to 23 budget to boost school aids, special education funding, and support for mental health. The bulk of the new money is an additional $844 million for equalization aids, which are distributed according to a formula based on the property values in a district. So that would help us. The proposal represents a 7.3% increase in the first year of the budget and 2.5% in the second. DPI is also seeking $108.4 million more for per pupil aids, which are distributed evenly to school districts regardless of property values. So the proposals would add $150 for each student in poverty. So that would very much support our students and families. DPI is also seeking $371 million boost for special education and another $4.6 million in mental health and wellness aid. So the new proposals include several provisions to address impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic, including, so if this is all supported, we'd be able to decide which enrollment count we want to use for a year or two going forward. So so that might be helpful for us, given that so many districts have had a significant drop in enrollment similar to ours, and that's many of it is due to 4K, 5K enrollment reductions. Allowing districts to count 4K as full-time equivalent. So now they're counted as 0.5 or 0.6, depending on how many hours of instruction are offered. And then limiting how much state aid a district can lose due to declining enrollments. And we're well aware that we benefit from that exemption. And so that would either be increased or extended in time, which would be helpful for us. So the DPI budget also calls for an annual increase to the per pupil revenue limit to account for inflation going forward. The limit serves as a cap on how much a district can spend per student between state aid and property taxes. The DPI budget calls for increasing that by $150 per student in fiscal year 2022. And then beginning in 2023, the revenue limit will go up each year based on the consumer price index. And the agency estimates that would be amount to about per pupil adjustment of $15.25 in fiscal year 2023. So depending, again, the budget process in Wisconsin takes a while. And so this is just the first kind of proposal from the department on the table. But I'm sure Caitlin will be watching this closely and will advise kind of how we start to position ourselves as this next budget cycle starts to become more clear. And then finally, the 2020 presidential election results, that Vice President Joe Biden, at the time we were writing this, had 290 electoral college votes, and President Trump had 232. So on January 2021, Joe Biden is expected to become the 46th president of the United States of America. And then I will go on to 8.3, our Board of Education recognitions for November 23rd. So at Nathan Hale High School, congratulations to the 2020 WIAA Division I State Diving Qualifier, Courtney Neuendorf. She is a 10th grader at Nathan Hale High School and competed on Saturday the 14th at Waukesha South High School. She took 11th place. Courtney's going to be one for us to watch over the next couple of years. So congratulations, Courtney. And then at West Milwaukee Intermediate School, special thanks to reading teacher Kelly Schmidt for working with 7th grader Journey to write a grant proposal for a character playbook community impact grant. Journey was selected out of 40 applicants to present her plan for an outdoor classroom in front of representatives from the United Way and the Green Bay Packer organization. So we're expecting to get results back in early December. And even if this is awarded, it'll be great. It'll be a great project for students and staff at West Milwaukee. But even if it's not, these kinds of activities, engagements for young people are very much in line with their deeper learning competencies work, right? So a student that and takes some initiative, is empowered to write a grant proposal, has to then publicly get up and communicate that as part of how we develop those competencies with our young people. And then as we move into this particular holiday, we just really want to express how thankful we are for all the children and families we serve, but also thankful for teachers, staff members, coaches, club advisors, school leaders, community members, secretaries, board members, everybody that's supporting us in achieving our mission and vision, even in such unique times. But it's always important to take a step back and just show our appreciation for all of the work that everybody contributes to this effort called West Dallas West Milwaukee School District. And then 8.4, just a couple updates from me. There were no public comments on November 9th. So it was our last regular meeting, so nothing to follow up on there. Our facility planning continues. And so we're at the point now where principals, our school principals are reaching out to get volunteers to participate on our facility advisory community team, or FACT. That will be one staff member and one family from each school. And so we're saying family because then the adults in the family maybe can't make every single meeting, but their family is the representative for the school. Stephanie will be talking about this in the president's report to invite board members. So we're looking for 2 board members to be part of that team. There'll also be some representatives from the cities or municipalities, a couple community members. It'll be a large group that then will be working over a number of weeks to help shape the facility master plan. And then on a really kind of exciting good news front, the Target event, that is an annual event that is supported from the Zeman family, is going to take place again this year, but in a different way. And I just want to first, I'm going to turn it over to Deidre here to share a little bit of the detail of how she and Shelly are going to pull this thing off. And I'm shaking my head because I don't, but it's going to happen. And it'll be special in a different way. But I really want to thank the Zeman family again for contributing to this. And so Deidre, if you can give us a little more detail.
Sure. So we have a small but mighty little committee that's been working on this for the last couple of weeks and figure it out. And Shelly and Linda Gritzmacher from our recreation department have been working really closely with the local Target. So we have an aggressive schedule where each school is working right now to identify their families that are going to be able to be included in the event. And then the teachers are going to volunteer to do some empathy interviews and online shopping with the students that are identified. And then we have a schedule where they're going to enter their online orders on one day. And then the next day that school will go pick everything up. And then we're packaging it all up into gift baskets, and the school buses are actually going to go and deliver into our neighborhoods. So to get 11 schools through the whole process and figure the whole thing out, we are on a very tight schedule between December 2nd when we start this routine and December 17th when we get the last of everything kind of sent out. But we're really excited, and the schools are really excited to be able to provide this to the families that are truly in need this year in particular, and be able to share that in that experience with them. So more information, and families are being notified and identified this week, and more information are going out directly from those school sites to those families in particular, and to staff and how they can volunteer. We have a ton of volunteers from our high schools in particular. This is if you've ever gone to this event, which is normally would be next weekend, usually on the Saturday. That first weekend in December, it usually is. There's tons of high school students who volunteer. So they're anxious to still be a part of it. And I have left that up to the schools to do, because I certainly wasn't asking the teachers to take on this and then also try to get a high school student in the Zoom trying to work on the shopping piece of it, but they are actually trying to make that part of it work as well. So our students have those opportunities to volunteer in some way, shape, or form. And then a thank you to Sodexo, who's also making a food kit for each one of the families that gets identified. Just with Shelly keeps saying to Steve, we don't want to offend you, but we'd really like more fun food in it than what you normally provide under the nutrition guidelines. So he is working on that, and he'll have something ready for us. So we're going to be in mass production around making these kits and baskets for the families in the greatest need in the next several weeks, and figuring out how to deliver it all via our school buses. So then we've also been able to put those to some use during this time as well.
Cool. Thank you. And then the last couple notes. So Deidre and I had the opportunity to participate in presentations from students at West Milwaukee from the Business Innovations class. So it's new. And it's a little bit along the lines of Shark Tank, where they had worked on a project together as a class, and they had to then present it or make their pitch to us as representing a group of potential investors. And we were fascinated by it. They did a really nice job. A couple of the interesting things, again, these are the moments where we build the deeper learning competencies. And it was clear that a couple of their classmates were missing. And it was impressive how quickly these young people, right? These are middle school kids, how quickly they figure it out, like where the hole was, and like, and somebody, a student say, well, so-and-so, can you take this part? And so they figured it out amongst themselves kind of on the fly, which was impressive. And it was interesting that the fact that this was the first one that I've been a part of that was a virtual presentation, and it seemed to be a little better organized and actually flowed a little better than the face-to-face ones. So I think there may be some interesting learning going on there. But I just wanted to highlight the young people at West Milwaukee for taking on, and it's an interesting product that they want to produce.
And just to add something quickly to that, Marty, that was also on a Wednesday. So
that's right.
Yeah, that
right.
was
Essentially, it's a day when they're not a
day, and that was the only day we could do it, where we could get both Marty and I there. So they had quite a few students there, given the fact that technically that's not a required time when they would normally need to meet.
Yep, good, thank you. Yeah, and then the last piece is, this is through Deidre and the student services team, that we also provide support opportunities for educators, right? And this is through St. A, so our relationship with St. A, and they're running kind of virtual check-in conversations. How do you make sure you're caring for yourself through all of this? And the most recent one had 31 participants in it. And so we think it's an important service that we're providing. It's important that we attend to the socially emotional well-being of kids, but also of each other, of the adults. And so we encourage employees, when those opportunities are presented, to participate, because it seems to be catching on and is helpful. And then lastly, just personally, I'd like to express appreciation at this time of year for everybody that is working so hard in different ways, and just wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. It's clear as we engage with groups of teachers that it's time for a little break. And so I just want everybody to step away, take some deep breaths, be safe, and enjoy. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Lechman. I was just notified by Suzette that the young lady from West Milwaukee who had the grant application was actually selected. The grant was selected. I think that happened on Friday. So we'll have an update on that next time, but even better news from that story. So good to hear there. All right, so we'll move on to item 9 of the board president's report, taking a look at the board calendar. So tonight, November 23rd, we have a regular Board of Education meeting. Next Monday, November 30th at 6 p.m., we have a board workshop with Melissa Matarazzo from Studer. So that will be held as well. That'll be at 6 o'clock. Monday, December 7th at 6 o'clock, we do have a regular Board of Education meeting, and immediately following a financial stability and efficiency workshop on the budget calendar. On Monday, December 14th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting, and that will conclude our meetings for calendar year 2020. And then we'll have meetings in early 2021. Do any board members have any community events or anything to update on related to the board calendar? I'd like to say a quick little shout out to the West Allis Community Improvement Foundation. This last Saturday, we did a food drive in lieu of the breakfast of Thanksgiving that is normally held, which would have been today, in order to help raise funds for area food banks and food pantries. Thank you to the West Allis West Milwaukee High School students and elementary and middle school students who came out to help and volunteer. That was great. There was an update. They received lots more cash donations this year, which was great since they offered the ability to donate online. And throughout the nice day on Saturday, people did drive up and make some food donations as well. So we're very grateful for that. And thank you to the foundation for continuing to support our students and families by all the different things they do, but especially in this time of need. So thank you to that. Okay, so we'll move on to item 9.2, which is a discussion of the facility advisory community team. So some board members are interested in participating, which is great. I'm already kind of laid out what that would entail and how we're going to organize that. So this is more notice that if any board members are interested in participating in the FACT group, from a board perspective, there are 8 meetings that are required for each person that's on the committee to attend. They're on the disclosure and the information that Marty sent out on Friday. If you are interested as a board member to participate, please email me your interest by 5 p.m. on Wednesday. And then we are going to have 2 board members that participate on the committee. Again, the committee is the board role is a non-voting role. And if we have more than 2 people who are interested, then it'll be random selection. But by 5 o'clock on Wednesday, if you can do that, then I can confirm with everyone over Thanksgiving to make sure that everyone that was selected is still ready to go. And then we can make that selection final and get that submitted for the group. So 5 p.m. Wednesday, if you're interested in participating in the FACT as a board member. All right, we'll move on to item 10, item 10, our consent agenda. There are 4 items this evening. Item 10.1, the approval of our minutes. Item 10.2, the employment summary. Item 10.3, the supplementary contracts, and item 10.4, the financial summary. Who's going to be the one that requests something separated? Mr. Sickich.
I need supplemental contract, correct? Supplemental contract removed.
Got it. So we'll be separating out item 10.3. Does anybody, does anybody else need anything else separated? If not, we'll look for a motion on 10.1, 10.2, and 10.4.
Move to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, then we have item 10.3. We would need a motion first, and then I'll take abstentions.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those that will be abstaining?
Will not be abstaining. I will be recusing.
Recusing, okay. Ms. Justin?
Same.
Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much, everyone, for that. All right, move on to our action items for this evening. Item 11.1, the approval of payment of 2 state trust fund loans. Ms. Windler.
Hi, everybody. All right, so this one is really exciting for us. We talked about it many times, and tonight is the actual official approval of the payment of 2 of our state trust fund loans, so we'll pay them off. And so you'll recall that we did a refinancing of one of our state trust fund loans, which is Fund 38, but that one's a little goofy. That is actually outside of the revenue limit, unlike our other Fund 38 dollars that are inside the revenue limit. So while the refinancing is saving taxpayer dollars, this prepayment will save operational dollars within our budget. So at the close of our 1920 fiscal year, we were able to make a transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 38, which is our debt service fund. And we'll be using those dollars to make a payment on January 4th for the remaining balances of these 2 state trust fund loans. And in doing so, we'll be saving interest in the amount of over $186,000, which is super awesome and will go to future flexibility in future budgets. And so for this current fiscal year, 2021, we have allocated those dollars to Fund 46 for future capital improvement needs. And going forward, we'll be discussing that as we do our budget process of where the debt payment that would have happened would go instead. So this is just the official approval, and you can see the breakdown of that $186,000 plus a few dollars in the attachments for anyone is able to see them online. So we are approving the payment of the remaining balances of those 2 state trust fund loans tonight.
Questions for Caitlin? Not with or motion.
Approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that passes. Yay. Cross that one off the list. Good job.
Good job, Caitlin.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
All right,
Caitlin.
we could change the agenda this evening. That is the last item on our agenda for tonight. So we would look for a motion to adjourn.
Hey, I got a question real quick. Sorry.
Bill?
Regarding 11.2 and facilities, what committee will that be going to?
Marty?
So facility, we worked through that with the recreation committee, so that's
Mhm.
where to go.
Good question. Thank you for clarifying. All right, motion to adjourn,
So moved.
Second.
moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone.